They called him the Ice Duke, a man who could freeze a room with a single glance and bankrupt a nation with a signature. But his greatest coldness wasn't in Parliament. It was in his own bedroom. History is written by the victors. But scandals? Scandals are written by the survivors. In 1884, Sebastian, the Duke of Harrogate, made a calculated decision. He would trade his devoted wife, Amelia, for ultimate political power. He expected her to fade away quietly, a weeping footnote in his rise to glory. He was wrong. This is the story of how a duchess didn't just leave. She walked away with the crown jewels, her dignity, and the one thing he could never buy back, his reputation. London, November 1884. The fog clinging to the gas lamps of Grosvenor Square was thick enough to choke on, but inside Harrogate House, the air was even more suffocating. Sebastian St. Clair, the 9th Duke of Harrogate, stood by the fireplace in his study. He was a man carved from marble, tall, devastatingly handsome in that severe aristocratic way, and utterly devoid of warmth. At 32, he was the youngest man ever tipped for the prime ministership, provided he could secure the backing of the ultra-conservative Lord Bancroft. And Lord Bancroft had a daughter, a very unmarried daughter, named Lady Beatrice. Sebastian swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. He wasn't looking at the fire. He was looking at a document on his desk. It was a legal petition for an annulment. "It is the only way, Your Grace," said Mr. Thaddeus Moore, his solicitor, a small, rat-faced man who smelled of stale tobacco and secrets. "The clause in your grandfather's will is specific. If the current Duchess has not produced a male heir within 5 years, and if there is proof of incompatibility, the marriage can be dissolved to protect the lineage." "Amelia has been a model wife," Sebastian said, his voice a low, smooth baritone. It wasn't a defense, it was a statement of fact. "A model wife who is barren, according to your testimony," Moore countered, tapping the paper. "And Lady Beatrice comes with £50,000 a year and her father's vote block in the House of Lords. You want the premiership, Sebastian? You cannot get it with a barren country girl on your arm." Sebastian looked up at the portrait hanging above the mantel. It was Amelia. She had been 20 when they married, bright-eyed, the daughter of a minor viscount, possessed of a laugh that used to make the servants smile. He had married her for her dowry to fix the roof of his country estate. She had married him because she loved him. He had never told her that her love was unrequited. It was simply inconvenient. "Draft it," Sebastian said, downing his drink. "But do not serve it yet. The winter ball is in 3 days. I need Bancroft to see me as a family man one last time before I make the transition. I will handle Amelia after the ball." "Ha, she will create a scene," Moore warned. Sebastian sneered, a rare crack in his icy mask. "Amelia, she is a mouse, Moore. She will cry, she will faint, and then she will go back to her father's crumbling estate in Yorkshire with a generous pension. She doesn't have the spine for a scene." Meanwhile, in the drawing room, Amelia sat by the window, the needle of her embroidery hovering over the silk. She wasn't stitching, she was listening. The heavy oak doors of the study were thick, but the ventilation grates in this draughty old mansion carried sound in treacherous ways. She hadn't heard every word, but she had heard enough. Baron, Lady Beatrice, annulment. Her hand didn't shake. That was the first surprise. Amelia looked down at her stomach. She wasn't barren. In fact, she had been meaning to tell Sebastian for weeks that she had finally visited a specialist in Harley Street, a doctor, William Halloway, who had confirmed that the issue wasn't her fertility. It was likely the stress and the infrequency of their marital relations. But she had held back, waiting for a moment of tenderness that never came. She stood up, walking to the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the naive girl from Yorkshire anymore. 5 years of London society, of navigating the shark tank of the peerage, had changed her. She wore diamonds like armor. A mouse, she whispered to her reflection, repeating her husband's words. A strange, cold smile touched her lips. It was a smile Sebastian had never seen. She rang the bell for her maid, a sharp-witted Irish girl named O'Malley. "Yes, Your Grace," O'Malley curtsied. "Prepare my trunk," Amelia said, her voice steady. "Not the large travel ones, just the strong box. And send a telegram to my cousin Thomas in the energetic barrister's firm in Chancery Lane. Tell him I have a case regarding contractual fraud." "Is everything all right, my lady?" "Everything is finally clear, O'Malley," Amelia replied, turning back to the window. "The Duke wishes to trade me in for a newer model. He believes I will go quietly." She touched the heavy sapphire necklace at her throat, the Harrogate sapphire. It belonged to the Duchess. "He is about to learn," she murmured, "that a mouse, cornered by a cat, doesn't always run. Sometimes it bites." That night, Sebastian came to dinner late. He sat at the long mahogany table, the distance between them spanning 20 feet of cold silence. "You look pale, Amelia," he commented, cutting his steak with precise surgical movements. "Perhaps you should retire early. Rest for the winter ball." "I am perfectly well, Sebastian," she replied, taking a sip of wine. She watched him. He was beautiful, in a cruel way, and he was lying to her with every breath. "I was actually thinking about the future today." He paused, his knife screeching faintly against the china. "The future?" "Yes. I was thinking that after 5 years, perhaps it is time we re-evaluated our arrangements." Sebastian's heart skipped a beat. Had Moore leaked the plan? He looked at her, searching for hysteria, for tears. He saw only calm blue eyes. "We can discuss domestic matters later," he dismissed her. "I have work." "Of course," Amelia said. "You always have work." As he left the room, leaving her alone with the candles, Amelia blew out the flame nearest to her. "Enjoy your work, Sebastian," she whispered into the darkness. "It's the only thing you'll have left." 2 days later, the morning of the winter ball, the tension in London was palpable. The newspapers were buzzing with rumours of a cabinet reshuffle, and the name on everyone's lips was St. Clair. Sebastian was riding high, arrogant in his certainty that his plan was flawless. Amelia, however, had been busy. She had spent the last 48 hours not weeping, but accounting. She had the keys to the household ledgers, a duty Sebastian considered beneath him. He assumed she merely authorized the purchase of candles and beef. He didn't realize she had tracked every penny of the St. Clair fortune. She sat in her private solar, her cousin Thomas sitting opposite her. Thomas was not a lord. He was a working man, a barrister with ink-stained fingers and a sharp mind. "It's worse than you thought, Amelia," Thomas said, keeping his voice low. "I've looked into the dowry contracts. Sebastian didn't just use your money to fix the roof. He used it to pay off his father's gambling debts to a syndicate in the East End. Technically, that money was a loan from your father's estate to the dukedom, not a gift." "Meaning?" Amelia asked. "Meaning, if he annuls the marriage, he owes you the principal sum plus 5 years of interest, roughly £60,000. Amelia let out a dry laugh. "He doesn't have £60,000. He's land-rich and cash-poor. That's why he needs Lady Beatrice." "If you press this claim," Thomas warned, "you will bankrupt him before he even gets to the altar with the Bancroft girl. He will be ruined. The scandal of a duke being sued by his own wife for debt. It would destroy his political career instantly." Amelia looked out at the grey London sky. "He plans to discard me, Thomas. To declare me barren and unfit publicly. He plans to ruin my life to build his. So what do you want to do?" Amelia stood up, smoothing the skirts of her emerald morning dress. "I want him to make the choice. I want him to look me in the eye and choose. If he chooses power, I will unleash the storm. The winter ball." The Harrogate ballroom was a spectacle of gold leaf and velvet. The cream of British society was there, earls, countesses, and of course Lord Bancroft and his daughter, Lady Beatrice. Beatrice was young, perhaps 19, with a pouty mouth and eyes that roamed the room looking for the most expensive thing in it. Tonight, her eyes were fixed on Sebastian. Amelia entered the ballroom late. She had chosen a dress that defied convention. It was midnight blue velvet, cut lower than was modest, draped with diamonds that glittered like ice. She didn't look like a matron. She looked like a queen. The room went silent as she descended the grand staircase. Sebastian, who was deep in conversation with Lord Bancroft, looked up. For a split second, his jaw tightened. She was supposed to be the retiring, meek wife. Tonight, she was consuming all the oxygen in the room. "Your wife looks spirited tonight, Harrogate," Lord Bancroft grunted, swirling his port. "I was under the impression she was a delicate creature." "She has her moments," Sebastian said tightly. He excused himself and intercepted Amelia at the bottom of the stairs. He gripped her elbow, his fingers digging into her flesh through the velvet. "What are you doing, Amelia? You're making a spectacle." "I am merely playing the part of the Duchess, Sebastian," she smiled, pulling her arm away. "Isn't that what you want? A perfect display for your investors." "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Go and sit with the dowagers. Do not speak to Lord Bancroft." "Why?" Amelia challenged him, her eyes flashing. "Afraid I might tell him about the gambling debts, or perhaps about the mistress you keep in St. John's Wood." Sebastian froze, the colour drained from his face. "You know nothing." "I know everything, Sebastian." She stepped closer, her perfume, a heavy scent of jasmine and musk, clouding his senses. "And I am giving you one chance, tonight. Dance with me. Announce that we are taking a trip to Italy, just the two of us. Forget Bancroft. Forget the premiership. Choose me." It was an ultimatum, a lifeline. Sebastian looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the intelligence he had ignored for 5 years. For a moment he felt a pull, a memory of the day he met her, when she had laughed at a joke he made. But then he looked over her shoulder. He saw Lord Bancroft watching him, tapping his pocket watch. The premiership, the power to rule the empire, the legacy. He looked back at Amelia, and his eyes went cold. "Italy," he scoffed, cruel and quiet. "Don't be a child, Amelia. Go upstairs. I have real business to attend to." He turned his back on her. He walked straight toward Lady Beatrice, bowing low and offering his hand for the waltz. Amelia stood alone in the center of the floor for a heartbeat. The rejection was public, absolute, and humiliating. The whispers started immediately behind fans and hands. "Did you see?" He left her standing there. "The Bancroft girl is next, mark my words." Amelia didn't cry. She didn't run. She signaled the orchestra conductor, a man she had tipped heavily earlier that day. The music stopped abruptly. Sebastian and Beatrice froze mid-step. The room fell into a deathly silence. Amelia walked to the center of the room. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice carried with the crystal clarity of a bell. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amelia said, "I apologize for the interruption, but since my husband seems too overcome with his business to make the announcement, I shall do it for him." Sebastian turned, his eyes widening in horror. "Amelia, stop," he mouthed, stepping forward. She ignored him. "The Duke has been working tirelessly to secure the future of this family," Amelia continued, smiling at Lady Beatrice. "But I am afraid there has been a change of plans. As of this morning, I have filed a petition with the High Court." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Not for divorce," Amelia said, locking eyes with Sebastian, "but for the immediate repayment of the £60,000 my father's estate lent to the duchy, a debt which, I am sad to say, the Duke is unable to pay without selling. Well, this house..." Sebastian stopped dead. The blood rushed to his face. Lord Bancroft dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. "So," Amelia finished, "I invite you all to drink the champagne quickly. I'm afraid the bailiffs will be here in the morning." She dropped a mock curtsy to her husband. "Good night, Sebastian. I hope the power was worth the price." As the room erupted into absolute chaos, Amelia turned and walked out the double doors, her head held high, leaving the Duke standing in the ruins of his ambition. This was only the beginning. The war for Harrogate had just begun. The morning after, Fleet Street. The scandal did not just ripple through London. It exploded like a bomb in a munitions factory. However, Sebastian Senilla, Claire had not become the most powerful man in the House of Lords by letting a woman dictate the narrative. While Amelia slept fitfully in the modest guest room of her cousin Thomas's townhouse in Bloomsbury, Sebastian was already at work. He sat in the private office of the London Chronicle, the city's most widely read broadsheet. Opposite him sat the editor, a man named Mr. Blackwood, who owed his position entirely to Sebastian's patronage. "It is a tragedy, really," Sebastian said, his voice laced with a perfectly manufactured sorrow. He pressed a handkerchief to his dry eyes. "The mind is such a fragile thing. We have tried to keep it private, of course. Her obsession with her inability to conceive. It has finally snapped her reason." Blackwood scribbled furiously, his eyes wide. "So, the debt? The proclamation at the ball?" "Hallucinations," Sebastian sighed, leaning back in the leather chair. "Paranoia. She believes I am plotting against her, because her mind cannot accept the reality of our domestic sorrow. I have been advised by Dr. Halloway to have her committed to a sanitarium in Switzerland for her own safety. But she ran away." "A mad wife," Blackwood murmured. "The poor Duke." "Indeed," Sebastian said, placing a heavy bag of coins on the desk. "I trust you will handle this delicately. I only want her found and returned to my care before she hurts herself." 3 days later, Amelia sat at Thomas's breakfast table, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper. The headline screamed in bold black ink, "The Madness of the Duchess, a tragedy of barrenness and hysteria." Below it was a caricature of her, looking wild-eyed and dishevelled, pointing a finger at a noble, suffering Sebastian. The article detailed anonymous sources, claiming Amelia had been speaking to walls, inventing debts, and threatening servants for months. It painted Sebastian not as a villain, but as a saintly husband trying to protect his lunatic wife. "He is destroying me," Amelia whispered, the paper crumping in her fist. "He isn't just denying the debt. He is erasing my sanity." Thomas paced the small room, looking grim. "It's effective, Amelia. I went to the bank this morning to withdraw funds from your private trust. The accounts are frozen. Sebastian has filed an emergency injunction as your legal guardian, citing mental incompetence. We can't access a penny to pay for a solicitor to fight him." Amelia felt the walls closing in. She had played a strong hand at the ball, but she had forgotten that Sebastian owned the casino. Without money, and with her reputation in tatters, she was just a mad woman, shouting into the void. "There is a letter for you," Thomas said gently, sliding a cream-colored envelope across the table. "It arrived by courier an hour ago. No seal." Amelia opened it. It was a single line, written in an elegant, spidery hand. "If you wish to defeat the wolf, you do not bark at him. You find the trap he laid for himself. Meet me at the Botanical Gardens, the Orchid House. Noon." "It's a trap," Thomas warned. "Sebastian is trying to lure you out to have you seized by the alienists." "Perhaps," Amelia said, standing up. The fear was still there, churning in her stomach, but beneath it was the cold, hard rage that had been born the night of the ball. "But I have nothing left to lose, Thomas. If I stay here, I am a prisoner of his lies. If I go, at least I am moving." She went to the mirror and tied a heavy veil over her face. She would not hide in the shadows. If they wanted a mad woman, she would show them a warrior. The Orchid House. The air inside the glass conservatory was thick, humid, and smelled of wet earth and exotic blooms. Amelia walked slowly down the aisle, the condensation dripping from the glass panes like tears. At the far end, sitting on a wrought-iron bench, was a figure entirely unexpected. It was not Sebastian. It was not a doctor. It was Lady Helena St. Clair, the Dowager Duchess, Sebastian's mother. Helena was a woman of 60, terrifyingly thin, dressed in perpetual mourning black, with eyes as sharp as cut glass. She and Sebastian had not spoken in 10 years, ever since he had exiled her to the dower house in the country to save money on her allowance. "You're late," Helena snapped, not looking up from the orchid she was inspecting. "Your Grace," Amelia curtsied instinctively, then straightened. "I did not know you were in London." "I'm not. I'm a ghost," Helena said, turning to look at her daughter-in-law. "Or so my son wishes. I read the papers. Hysteria, is it? Barrenness?" "Lies," Amelia said firmly. "I know," Helena replied. She patted the spot next to her. "Sit down, girl. You made a mess of things at the ball. Dramatic, yes, but foolish. You attacked his wallet. You should have attacked his pride." Amelia sat, wary. "Why are you here? You never liked me. You called me a country mouse when I married him." "I didn't like you because you were weak," Helena said, her voice dry as dust. "I thought you were just another sheep for Sebastian to shear. But the other night, when I heard what you did, when I heard you embarrassed him in front of Bancroft, I thought, perhaps the mouse has grown teeth." Helena reached into a reticule and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. It wasn't a ledger. It was a diary. "Sebastian thinks he is the architect of his own fortune," Helena said, "but he forgets who built the foundation. My husband, the 8th Duke, was a scoundrel, but he was a careful one. Sebastian is reckless. He made a deal 3 years ago to secure the railway contracts in the north. Illegal contracts." Amelia's eyes widened. "The railway scheme? But that was hailed as a triumph of his parliamentary career." "It was a bribe," Helena hissed. "He took money from the French consortiums to block British steel. It's treason, Amelia. Or close enough to hang him politically." She shoved the book into Amelia's hands. "This is the diary of his late secretary, Mr. Pendergast, the man who accidentally fell into the Thames last winter. Pendergast sent this to me for safekeeping before he died. He knew Sebastian would kill for it." Amelia held the book like it was a live grenade. "Why give this to me? Why destroy your own son?" Helena looked away, her expression softening, for the briefest second, into something resembling pain. "Because he is not the son I raised. He is a monster, made of ambition. He discarded me. He discarded you. If he becomes Prime Minister, he will sell this country just as he sold us. I am an old woman, Amelia. I have no power. But you have the public's eye. They think you are mad. Prove them wrong." Amelia tucked the book into her coat. "If I use this, there is no going back. The St. Clair name will be ruined. You will be ruined too." Helena smiled, a terrifying, shark-like grin. "My dear, I was ruined the day I gave birth to him. Burn it all down." The siege of Harrogate House, possessing the evidence was one thing, using it was another. Amelia returned to Thomas's house, her heart pounding against her ribs. Thomas reviewed the diary with a lawyer's critical eye. By the time he looked up, his face was pale. "This is dynamite, Amelia," Thomas whispered. "Dates, amounts, names of French diplomats. If this gets out, Sebastian goes to prison. Not debtor's prison. Newgate. We need to publish it," Amelia said. "No newspaper will touch it," Thomas countered. "The Chronicle is in Sebastian's pocket. The others are too afraid of libel laws. If we print this and can't prove it instantly, we hang." "Then we don't use the press," Amelia said, a plan forming in her mind. A plan so reckless it made the winter ball look like a tea party. "We go to the one place where he cannot hide, the one place where the truth is recorded forever." "Where?" "The House of Lords." The following afternoon, Parliament was in session. The air in the gallery was stale with cigar smoke and the drone of old men debating grain tariffs. Sebastian St. Clair stood at the podium, looking every inch the future Prime Minister. He was eloquent, commanding, and utterly confident. He was in the middle of a speech regarding moral fortitude in public office, a topic that made Amelia's blood boil as she stood in the shadows of the ladies' gallery, veiled and trembling. She wasn't allowed on the floor. Women were observers, not participants. But she had a proxy. Lord Bancroft was there, sitting in the front row, looking bored. And next to him, surprisingly, was a man Amelia had reached out to late last night, Sir Edward Calloway. Sir Edward was the leader of the opposition. He was a man of stern principles who had been trying to find a chink in Sebastian's armor for years. Amelia had sent him a few pages of the diary, just enough to whet his appetite. As Sebastian finished his speech to thunderous applause from his party, Sir Edward stood up. "My lords," Edward's voice boomed, "the Duke speaks eloquently of morality. But I must ask a question regarding the Northern Railway contracts of 1881. The room went silent. Sebastian froze at the podium. He gripped the wood, his knuckles whitening. "The contracts are a matter of public record, Sir Edward." "Are they?" Edward asked, holding up a piece of paper. "Because I have in my possession a sworn affidavit and a diary entry from a Mr. Pendergast. Does the name ring a bell, Your Grace?" A murmur ran through the chamber. Sebastian's face turned the color of ash. "This is preposterous," Sebastian scoffed, though his voice wavered. "Rumors from the grave. Who provided this slander?" Edward looked up towards the ladies' gallery. He pointed a finger. "The Duchess of Harrogate." Every head in the chamber turned upward. Amelia stepped forward to the railing. She lifted her veil. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry and fierce. She didn't look mad. She looked terrifyingly sane. "She is unwell," Sebastian shouted, losing his composure. "She is a hysterical woman who has been seduced by madness. I demand she be removed." "I am perfectly well, Sebastian," Amelia's voice rang out from the gallery, breaking every rule of parliamentary decorum. "But are you? Tell them about the French consortium. Tell them about the £50,000 deposited in the Shear account under the name Icarus." Chaos erupted. The Speaker of the House banged his gavel, shouting for order. Lords were standing, shouting, pointing. Sebastian looked from Amelia to Edward, realizing the trap had snapped shut. He made a fatal error. Instead of standing his ground, he gathered his papers and rushed out of the chamber. It was an admission of guilt. The escape. Amelia knew she had to leave immediately. She had humiliated him in the sanctity of government. He would not send doctors now. He would send thugs. She hurried down the back stairs of Westminster, Thomas gripping her arm. "The carriage is waiting," Thomas urged. "We need to get you out of London. He will have a warrant for your arrest by nightfall for theft of documents." They burst out into the cool evening air where the carriage was waiting. But as Amelia reached for the door, a hand clamped onto her shoulder. It wasn't a thug. It was Lord Bancroft. The powerful older man looked at Amelia with a strange expression. Not anger. Respect. "You have spirit, girl," Bancroft grunted. "My daughter has been crying for 2 days because Sebastian hasn't called. I see now why he was distracted. Let me go," Amelia said, pulling away. "Go?" Bancroft laughed. "You just destroyed the Conservative Party's golden boy. You aren't going anywhere, Duchess. You are coming with me." "With you?" "Sebastian is finished," Bancroft said, lighting a cigar. "But the scandal will splash on me if I don't manage it. My daughter's name is linked to his. I need to distance myself. And the best way to do that is to be the protector of the poor, abused Duchess who exposed the corruption." He opened his own carriage door. "Get in, Amelia. I have the best lawyers in London. Sebastian wants a war? I'll give him a war. But you work for me now." Amelia looked at Thomas, then at Bancroft. It was a deal with a different devil, but Bancroft had the power to keep her out of prison. She stepped into Bancroft's carriage. The confrontation at Harrogate House. Sebastian returned home to find his house silent. The servants were gone. The lights were dim. He stormed into his study, pouring a drink with shaking hands. His political career was dead. The police would be asking questions by morning. His only hope was to flee to the continent. But sitting in his chair, in the dark, was a figure. "Going somewhere, Sebastian?" It was Lady Beatrice, the girl he was supposed to marry. She wasn't pouting now. She was holding a pistol. "Beatrice?" Sebastian blinked, confused. "What are you doing here?" "My father told me everything," she said, her voice trembling not with fear but with rage. "You were going to use my dowry to pay your debts. You were going to use me, just like you used her. Beatrice, listen to me." "No," she screamed. "I am a Bancroft. We do not get used." She fired. The bullet didn't hit him. It shattered the crystal decanter in his hand, sending glass and whiskey flying. Sebastian fell back, cutting his hand on the shards. "Get out," Beatrice hissed. "This house is foreclosed. My father bought the debt note from your wife an hour ago. You don't own this house, Sebastian. You don't own anything." Sebastian looked at his bleeding hand, then at the girl he had underestimated, and finally at the portrait of Amelia still hanging above the mantel. The mouse, the ghost, and the child, the three women he had dismissed, they had not just defeated him, they had dismantled him brick by brick. He stood up, clutching his bleeding hand, and walked out of his own front door into the rain. He had no coat, he had no carriage, he walked into the London fog, a duke of nothing. But the story wasn't over, because a wounded animal is the most dangerous of all, and Sebastian St. Clair had one last secret, one that could bring Amelia, Bancroft, and the entire government crashing down with him. 3 months later, London, February 1885. The Duke of Harrogate was officially dead, or at least that is what society believed. The newspapers had reported a suicide, a coat found by the docks, a note expressing remorse, a tragic end to a scandalous fall. It was a neat ending to a messy story. Amelia, now legally a widow, though she wore violet, not black, a subtle rebellion, was living in the townhouse Lord Bancroft had provided. She was celebrated as a whistleblower, a woman of courage who had brought down corruption. But she didn't feel safe. Every time the floorboards creaked in the night, she jumped. Every time a shadow moved in the street, she froze. The silence of the house felt heavy, like the air before a storm. She was right to be afraid. The East End, the Blind Beggar pub. In the basement of a gin palace in Whitechapel, far from the velvet drawing rooms of Mayfair, a man sat in the corner. He had a beard now, rough and unkempt, and his fine tailored suits were replaced by the rough wool of a dock worker. But the eyes, cold, blue, and calculating, were the same. Sebastian St. Clair was not dead. He was reinventing himself. He had spent the last 3 months in the hell of London's underworld, surviving on his wits and the few jewels he had sewn into the lining of his coat before he fled. He had learned quickly that here a title meant nothing, but fear meant everything. He had a new ally, a man named Silas the Butcher Reed, a gang leader who ran the opium dens by the river. Sebastian had promised Reed something valuable, the location of the Harrogate family vault key, which Amelia wore around her neck. "You say she wears it always?" Reed asked, sharpening a knife on a leather strop. "Always," Sebastian rasped. His voice was rougher now, damaged by the cheap tobacco and the damp air. "Inside that vault is not just gold. There are documents. Blackmail material on half the House of Lords. My grandfather collected secrets. If I get those, I don't just get my money back. I own the government. And you get half the gold." "And the girl?" Reed asked, testing the blade against his thumb. Sebastian's face twisted. It wasn't love anymore. It wasn't even hate. It was an obsession. "She humiliated me. She took my life. I want her to watch me take hers back, piece by piece." Tato the trap. Amelia had been working with her cousin Thomas on legal reform for women's property rights. It gave her purpose. Thomas had been her rock, his quiet strength a constant comfort. In truth, she was beginning to feel something more for him, a warmth, a safety she had never felt with Sebastian. One evening, Thomas didn't arrive for dinner. Amelia waited. The clock chimed 9, then 10. Thomas was never late. At midnight, a street urchin knocked on the door. He held out a dirty rag. Amelia took it, her hands shaking. Inside were Thomas's spectacles. The glass was cracked, and there was blood on the rim. Wrapped inside was a note, scrawled in charcoal. The vault key, or the lawyer dies. Come alone to the abandoned textile mill on Wharf Road. No police, no Bancroft. Just you. Midnight. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew who it was instantly. Dead men don't write notes, but ghosts do. "O'Malley," she called out, her voice trembling but resolute. The maid appeared, sensing the shift in the air. "My lady, go to Lord Bancroft. Tell him Sebastian is alive. Tell him to bring the police to the wharf, but tell him to wait until he hears a signal." "What signal, my lady?" "A gunshot," Amelia said, opening her drawer and taking out the small pearl-handled revolver she had bought weeks ago. It felt heavy and cold in her hand. "Either I will shoot him, or he will shoot me. But it ends tonight. The mill, the textile mill, was a skeletal beast of iron and rotting wood, looming over the black water of the Thames. The wind howled through the broken windows, sounding like lost souls. Amelia walked into the main floor, the lantern in her hand casting long, dancing shadows. The smell of rot and wet wood was overpowering. "Sebastian!" "Oh!" she called out. "I'm here!" "You look well, Amelia," a voice echoed from the darkness. Sebastian stepped into the light. He looked like a demon, gaunt, scarred, his eyes burning with a manic intensity. He held a knife to Thomas's throat. Thomas was tied to a chair, beaten, his face swollen, barely conscious. "Let him go," Amelia said, her hand tightening on the pistol hidden in her cloak pocket. "The key first," Sebastian demanded, extending a dirty hand. "Give me the key, and you can have your little solicitor. You can go back to playing house. I just want what is mine." "It was never yours," Amelia said, reaching for the chain around her neck. "You stole the dowry. You stole the future. You deserve nothing." "I was a duke," Sebastian roared, the veneer cracking. "I was born to rule. You were a milkmaid I lifted out of the mud." "And look at us now," Amelia replied calmly. "I am standing. You are kneeling in the dirt." She unclasped the necklace. She held the key up. It glinted in the lantern light. "Catch," she said. She threw the key, not at him, but over the railing, into the dark, churning waters of the mill race below. Sebastian screamed. It was a sound of pure, animal despair. He shoved Thomas aside, the chair crashing to the floor, and lunged for the railing, watching his future sink into the sludge. "You witch!" he shrieked, turning on her. "I'll kill you!" He charged. Amelia drew the pistol. She didn't hesitate. She fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the cavernous space. Sebastian stumbled. He looked down at his shoulder, where a blossom of red was spreading. He looked at Amelia with genuine shock. The mouse had bitten, but he didn't fall. He was fueled by adrenaline and rage. He lunged again, tackling her to the ground. The pistol skittered away. His hands were around her throat, squeezing, choking the life out of her. "I made you," he spat, his face inches from hers, his breath foul. "I will unmake you." Amelia clawed at his face, her vision going black. She couldn't breathe. She saw stars, then a sickening crack. Sebastian went limp. Amelia gasped, air rushing into her burning lungs. She shoved his heavy body off her. She looked up. Thomas was standing there, swaying, holding a heavy iron bar he had managed to grab. He had struck Sebastian over the head. Amelia scrambled to Thomas, untying his ropes with frantic fingers. "Thomas, are you all right?" "I think so," he wheezed. He looked down at Sebastian, who was groaning on the floor. "Is he dead?" "No," Amelia said, standing up and retrieving her pistol. She pointed it at Sebastian's head. "But he will wish he was." Before she could decide whether to pull the trigger again, the doors burst open. Lord Bancroft, the police, and a dozen men stormed in. It was over. The Old Bailey, April 1885. If the scandal of the debt had been a fire, the trial of Sebastian St. Clair was an inferno. The resurrected Duke was the headline in every paper from London to New York. The public queued for days just to get a glimpse of the fallen aristocrat being led into the dock in chains. Amelia sat in the witness box. She was no longer the frightened girl. She was composed, dressed in a suit of navy wool, her head high. The prosecution laid out the case: fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder, kidnapping. Sebastian's defense was desperate. He tried to claim insanity. He tried to claim Amelia had orchestrated it all to steal his title. He screamed from the dock, railing against the conspiracy of women, his eyes wild and unkempt. But the evidence was overwhelming: the diary, the testimony of the French bankers, and finally, Amelia's own unwavering account of the night at the mill. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the courtroom didn't cheer. It let out a collective breath. It was the end of an era. The untouchable aristocracy had been touched, and it had been found rotting. The judge, a stern man in a white wig, adjusted his spectacles and looked down at Sebastian. Sebastian St. Clair, you were given every advantage life can offer: wealth, status, education. You used them not to serve, but to devour. You are sentenced to transportation to the penal colonies in Australia for the term of your natural life. It was a fate worse than death for a duke. He would not die a martyr. He would live as a convict, breaking rocks in the sun, nameless and forgotten. As the guards dragged him away, Sebastian looked back one last time. He locked eyes with Amelia. He didn't scream. He just looked. Empty. The power was gone. The anger was gone. There was only the realization that he had lost the only person who had ever actually loved him. Amelia didn't look away. She watched him until the door closed, sealing his fate. Outside the court, the sun was shining. The crowds cheered as Amelia emerged. Thomas was waiting for her by the carriage. His arm was in a sling, but he was smiling. "It's over," he said. "Yes," Amelia nodded. She felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in 5 years. Lord Bancroft approached, tipping his hat. "Well done, Duchess. You have cleared the board. The Prime Minister wants to give you a commendation." "I don't want a commendation, Lord Bancroft," Amelia said. "What do you want?" "I want a divorce," she said. "A real one. And then I want to go home." "Home? To Yorkshire?" "No," Amelia smiled, looking at Thomas, taking his good hand in hers. "To wherever I choose to build it." Amelia did not fade away. She used the notoriety to launch a foundation for women's education. She became a patron of the arts, a voice for reform, and a woman who was feared and respected in equal measure. She never remarried. She didn't need a husband to define her, but Thomas remained her constant companion, her partner in work and in life. They traveled the world, not escaping, but exploring. And Sebastian? Reports occasionally drifted back from the colonies, of a prisoner who spoke in Latin to the seagulls, of a man who would sit by the ocean, staring at the horizon, muttering about a sapphire necklace and a winter ball. He had chosen power over love. In the end, the power destroyed him, and the love was the one thing that set his Duchess free. She had walked away with her pride, and she never looked back. London, autumn, 1890, 5 years later. The world had moved on, as the world always does. The gas lamps of London were slowly being replaced by the harsh, buzzing glow of electric light. The omnibuses were faster, the buildings taller, and the name St. Clair had largely faded from the gossip columns, replaced by newer scandals and fresher disgraces. But in a sunlit office overlooking the Thames, Amelia, no longer the Duchess of Harrogate, but simply Mrs. Amelia Vance, having taken her mother's maiden name, was building a legacy far more durable than a title. She stood by the window, watching the river traffic. At 31, she was more beautiful than she had been at 20. The softness of her youth had been replaced by a striking, elegant composure. She wore a dress of tailored charcoal silk, practical yet undeniably expensive. She was the head of the Vance Trust, an organization that provided legal counsel to women trapped in abusive marriages. She had used the ruins of the Harrogate estate, which she had systematically dismantled and sold off, to fund freedom for others. Thomas sat at the desk behind her, reviewing a brief. His hair was greying at the temples, a testament to the hard work of the last 5 years. They were not married. Amelia had vowed never to sign a contract of ownership again, but they were partners in every sense of the word. They shared a home, a life, and a quiet, profound love that didn't require an audience. "The letter arrived this morning," Thomas said softly, breaking the silence. He held up an envelope. The paper was rough, stained with sea salt and dirt. The stamp bore the mark of New South Wales, Australia. Amelia turned. Her heart gave a single hard thump against her ribs, an echo of an old fear. "Is he?" "He is dead," Thomas said. "Fever, they say, in the infirmary of the penal colony." Amelia walked over and took the letter. She didn't open it immediately. She ran her thumb over the seal. Sebastian St. Clair, the Ice Duke, the man who had sold her, hunted her, and tried to kill her. Dead on the other side of the world, thousands of miles from the soft velvet of the House of Lords. "Do you want to read it?" Thomas asked. "I have to," Amelia replied. She broke the seal. The handwriting was shaky, the scrawl of a dying man. "Amelia, if you are reading this, the heat has finally finished what the ambition began. I have nothing to leave you, no title, no fortune. You took all of that, and rightfully so. But I have one secret left. One thing I never told you, not even when I held the knife to your throat. You always asked why. Why I needed the power. Why I needed the premiership so desperately that I would discard you. You thought it was vanity. It was fear. My father didn't just leave gambling debts. He left a contract with the Circle of Seven, the men who really run the empire. They owned him. They owned me. I didn't want the premiership to rule, Amelia. I wanted it so I could pardon myself and escape them. I was trying to buy my freedom with your dowry. I failed. But you defeated them. When you exposed the railway scheme, you didn't just ruin me. You exposed 3 of the 7. You did what I was too weak to do. Enclosed is a coordinate. It is not for gold. It is the location of the ledger my father kept, the names of the other 4 men. The men who still sit in the House of Lords, the men who made us monsters. Burn it or use it. It is the only dowry I can return to you. You were the only thing in my life that was real, and I broke you to fix a fantasy. S. Amelia stared at the paper. A small slip of parchment fell out, a set of coordinates for a crypt in Highgate Cemetery. "What does it say?" Thomas asked, standing up and moving to her side. Amelia looked at the letter, then at the fire burning in the grate. The Circle of 7. Conspiracy. Shadowy figures controlling the government. It was the kind of secret that got people killed. It was the kind of power Sebastian had craved, the power that had rotted his soul from the inside out. She thought of the women she helped every day. Women who just wanted peace. Women who wanted to walk down the street without looking over their shoulders. If she went after these men, the war would start again. She would be the Duchess of Harrogate once more, fighting in the mud for political leverage. She would be pulled back into Sebastian's world of shadows and knives. "He wants me to finish his war," Amelia said quietly. "He wants me to take revenge on the men who controlled him." "And what do you want?" Thomas asked. Amelia looked at Thomas. She looked at the simple, honest life they had built. She looked at the sun shining on the Thames. "I want to be free," she said. She walked to the fireplace. "Amelia," Thomas cautioned, "if there are names in there, criminals, then let history judge them," she said. "I am done with judges." She dropped the letter and the coordinates into the fire. They watched as the paper curled and blackened. The last secrets of the Duke of Harrogate turned to ash and floated up the chimney, disappearing into the London fog. Amelia felt a physical weight lift from her shoulders. The string that had tied her to Sebastian across oceans and years finally snapped. "Come," she said, turning to Thomas and offering her hand. "We have a meeting with the Board of Education at 2. We are going to open a school for girls in the East End." "A school?" Thomas smiled, taking her hand. "That sounds dangerous." "Oh, it is," Amelia smiled back, her eyes bright and clear. "An educated woman is the most dangerous thing in the world, and that is the story of Amelia and the Duke, a tale that reminds us that true power isn't found in titles, crowns, or the fear you can instill in others. It is found in the courage to walk away when you are undervalued, and the strength to rebuild yourself from the ashes." Sebastian died a prisoner of his own ambition, but Amelia lived as the queen of her own life. What would you have done? Would you have used the coordinates to take down the secret society? Or would you have burned the letter to choose peace? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into historical drama, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story of scandal, betrayal, and redemption. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.